Hello, I'm Marius Grootveld. Together with Jantje Engels, we have an architecture office called Veldwerk Architecten. And we publish books and curate exhibitions as well as design buildings. And I'm here to present the alternative histories, or at least one of the three colors. But I thought it would be nice to just tell a bit about the project and somehow how it came to be. And I just was talking to Samuel, who introduced the book, which was very kind. Now I know why we are in the selection. Yeah, I'll just show how everything came together. Let's see. So the book was created by Marius Grootveld, a graphic designer living in London from the French side of Switzerland, and was also created in a large part in collaboration with Drawing Matter, and for Drawing Matter, Sarah Handelman is the director at that time. And as it was a very brief period that the book somehow came together, this was a beautiful collaboration to create this book. And the book is actually quite simple. It's just a collection of material, a collection of drawings, model shots up close, and model shots from far away. And the way it's bound, it's also really bound as this thick thing. The book is a book for an exhibition which we organized in collaboration with 70 architects, and I thought it would be nice to first talk a bit about what this exhibition is about and how it came to be. So here you can see indeed the contents of the book, an essay and an overview of the models. But in a way, the project started with a visit to Portugal, to this neighborhood by Cisa Malagueira, which the office is called Veldwerk, which means field work. We like to travel, we like to see architecture in real life and somehow tie together the strands of everything that's been built before. And visiting Malagueira, I came into contact with Neil Hophouse, who owns a part of the CISA drawing archive. Neil Hophouse is the director of Drawing Matter, or the owner of Drawing Matter, or the initiator of Drawing Matter, a drawing archive in Somerset. It's this wonderful setting somewhere in the English landscape, where he has a series of old barns, and where he also had some wonderful contemporary architects build new barns. So in between these cows, there is this archive hidden, and within this archive he collects these specifically architectural drawings. And it's quite nice to go through these drawings because he's also focused for a large part on sketches. And what I appreciate very much about sketches is somehow this idea of a fragile, they can contain a fragile idea, which of course in architecture is quite rare, because architecture often contains, you have to have a very substantial idea to in the end have to be able to build as a building. No, a building is very hard to reconsider. It's there. But this first thought that you have as an architect about a space or an aspect of what the building could be is often very fragile. And we as architects do not look at each other's sketches enough. I feel that we mainly look at each other's buildings, and then definitely as a starting architect, it can be very intimidating to look at these buildings, because they are like they're results of years of thought, years of work. And never so easy to somehow question. But going through the sketches, it is quite easy to question and to get a very close dialogue with these original architects. So this is, for instance, the sketchbook of Peter Merkley, which is this super innocent sketchbook where he draws with a ballpoint inside. It's really so accessible if you see it like this, rather than his very pure buildings. And then of these sketchbooks of Alvaro Siza, here he drew a self-portrait, drinking, are also quite wonderful. And then also the first thing that somehow tied to this visit to the archive a year after we visited this neighborhood of Malagueira was that this neighborhood of Siza, where we started, came back to our memories. No, you somehow had you could see the thoughts and the design sketches, and then the thoughts and these finalized built forms. And again, they made them so much more accessible, looking at these architectures through these sketches. And I even feel that some of these moments, Siza has these moments of incompleteness in his architecture, where he almost quite consciously builds the building unfinished. And looking at the sketches, you slowly start to understand how that it's possible. So I also feel that the sketch somehow allows you to think in a certain way, and then to communicate to the builder in a certain way. So as a preparation of the project, we also went around to several offices in Europe to somehow talk to them as to how they were thinking about architecture and how they were sketching. We could go through these beautiful sketchbooks by Jonathan Sergeson here in Switzerland. He has these wonderfully precise drawings to find out what the layout of the plan should be, all drawn by hand. And even all the facades and all the window details are drawn by hand in pencil. It's a real, almost traditional way of working. Then this other office, Lutyens Padmanabha, they have these beautiful contradictions between Baroque architecture from Rome, like the St. Peter here on the left, and then these very American buildings like this Venturi house on the right. And they somehow put these together, and they create really things that are in between in their architecture. But also the way that they were sketching was actually quite exciting, because they have this beautiful dialogue between the computer and hand drawing, where they would print out the plan, and then they would take a T-Pex correction fluid, and they would remodel their plan, and then they would draw again, and they would scan it and go back to the computer, and it would be this very beautiful linear process of hand modification of computer drawing. So it's quite exciting that it's not all artisanal, but it can also be somehow in between these artisanal ways. And even an office like Knapkius and Fickert, they were completely fascinated by this computer render because they could be incredibly precise in their process using these computer renders, and really explain how these buildings would work. And the other thing you see in their office was postcards from trips, where they would collect the references and somehow go through them. Then we went back to the archive again, and we tried to find a cross section of drawings. The idea of the publication is, in a way, that we invite a number of European architects, and we try to have this conversation about architecture on this very core level of the idea, and see if a dialogue with a precedent, which is always present in architecture. You know, you always work on each other's ideas, if that can be somehow distilled into a very essential part, without thinking about practicalities of the everyday building practice that these architects are in. So we selected for each architect a sketch that joined, and we asked these architects to take these sketches of historic architects and pretend as if they made the sketch themselves in another lifetime. And then somehow we asked them to inhabit the identity of this original architect, and somehow asked them if they would somehow continue the design process that was contained in the sketch, and somehow finish it by making a model, somehow a model as the next step in the design process beyond a sketch. And that was the very simple brief. And that's what we tried to somehow do. So it was a very enjoyous process to somehow typecast these historic drawings to contemporary architects. We did also together with the Architecture Foundation. So on the left you can see Alice Woodman of the Architecture Foundation, and in the middle you can see Neil Hophouse of the Drawing Matter Foundation. And this is my partner Jantje, who we did the publication together with. So then we got these models in return of these offices, and I thought maybe it would be nice to just show a view of how they then somehow came about this. So here you can see how do you say it? The Underground City by Walter Pichler, which is this fantastical, enormous, monumental underground city, which he draws in these very fleeting sketches. But then Bell architects from Cologne, they interpreted it as this very banal subway intersection, which they then designed from it. So it was a very beautiful spin on Pichler. Or here Otto Schoenthal, which is interpreted by Thomas Dierks as this new contemporary folly. Also these sketches by Hans Pulzig, which are beautifully fleeting, the way. So also here again, if I see his architecture, I really understand how it came to be by looking at this sketch. And of course, Pulzig is a great inspiration for Caruso St. John, and somehow this is the most Pulzig-like Caruso St. John model I've seen so far. So it's also nice to really then get to this very close intersection between this inspirational reference and somehow this reworking of it. The primitive hut we gave to Takeshi from London, Hayatsu Architects, who has this very beautiful practice thinking about nature in architecture, and he collected twigs from Hyde Park, which he then where he reconstructed a primitive hut from, which he then cast in bronze. The crematorium from Gunnar Asplund in Woodland Cemetery we gave to Johan Selsing, the son of Peter Selsing, of course a contemporary of Asplund at some point, at a part of history. And he actually created this very beautiful, almost organic interpretation of this womb-like space that that Asplund created as the main how do you say it, mourning ceremony hall of the main crematorium. And somehow this womb-like reference makes so much sense looking at it through these eyes. And then lastly, Peter Merkley, who always creates these very rational drawings, which have some Otto Wagnerish influences in my mind in them, was given to Michael Bergquist, who created this beautiful folly from it. So these pictures actually were taken in collaboration with Guus Kaandorp on the right here, one of my oldest friends, and they were very exciting to do, because for me, this idea of an archive and this idea of a collection of models and drawings and sketches should somehow be able to be viewed by the visitor in a very personal way, and we didn't want to get too much in the way of somehow guiding the view of them. And we were fascinated by all these beautiful French documents, this Durand book describing the larger history of architecture, trying to distill the logics from it, or of course the description of Egypt by Napoleon and his team of scientists. And of course, Diderot, his encyclopedia, trying to somehow piece by piece document the world and explain how it worked. But somehow, what is nice about these documents is that these pieces were just somehow documented and put next to each other. But by seeing them all as a collection, all equal in a way, you as a viewer can really start to draw parallels. And in a way, we were also hoping to, in the exhibition and the publication, to ask this question to all these 80 European architects, and try to do the truth finding in the process. So we wanted to somehow show the results that they made in a as dry as possible way, so that then somehow by seeing them together, you could draw parallels yourselves as a visitor of the exhibition or as a reader of the book. And then the last piece of the puzzle for these pictures was this tool guide we found, where the pictures of the tools were almost presented as Denis Diderot drawings. So we also took pictures of the models, Guus and I, and we straightened them in a way that's only possible on the computer, to make them cabinet oblique projected. So the front side is flat and all other lines go parallel into the distance. Of course, a picture that you cannot take, only create. Somehow, yeah, displaying these objects where they're somewhere in between a picture and projection. Maybe lastly, and then we put them together on scale, so you could if you would browse through the catalog, you could really get an impression how big which piece was in relationship to the other pieces. And also, some only needed one view, and others needed 2 views, and others needed 4 views. So there's also almost like a Hilla and Bernd Becher-like way of somehow thinking about which objects needs which many views to understand how it really is put together. So it's more a picture going towards the technical drawing than just a picture alone. So here you have the small objects, and in the end, then it almost became like a Diderot slide. Therefore, somehow also these pictures that then Thomas Adank took here on the left were a beautiful complementary part. This was the idea of Matthias to somehow introduce this tactile quality to the models, which of course was very much there, and you could somehow feel them through the pages. And it's also what I also really like about these close-up images is that you somehow sometimes confuse the model with the drawing. So it sometimes feels, you sometimes get confused if it's a close-up of the drawing or of the model, or at least you could imagine it being a frame from the drawing, but then all of a sudden gaining materiality, because somehow the large object is irrelevant in these pictures. And then finally, to complete it, this similar idea about this dry collection of material, like the publication is also, there's a stack of matte and glossy pages on top of each other. The exhibition works in a similar way, also based on the drawing from the archive. Here you can see a stage set in a French theater, and we also derived a model reworking that these principles, and in the end resulting in the exhibition furniture piece, which also is like this archival cupboard, which is not filled completely, which can be filled more towards the future, and contains all these models to look at different levels and from different angles. The exhibition travels, so it started off here in Mayfair. No, this is Brussels. Sorry, it's now in Dublin on show, which is a very small exhibition space, and the beginning was in Mayfair and London, and it's quite beautiful how this enormous object changes, remains the same, but as the space around it changes, you read it differently, and you read the content differently. It was just built up 3 weeks ago in Dublin, but as there's a big lockdown today, the only visitor that is there is the son of the archive in Ireland, who has been looking at the structure for the past 3 weeks. That's the idea about the publication and the exhibition. If there's any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Well, I have no question really, but I love the book a lot. But I am Bertrand, one of the jury member here in Perpignan.
Nice to meet you.
Well, I like the fact that there is something that invite itself while you are looking for a sketch and its physical lecture. Mm-hmm. And then there's a third object who appears and put me physically involved in some way in space. Mm-hmm. It's not very clear because I don't have the good vocabulary to explain well what I'm saying. But the book gives me a lot of pleasure and produce some kind of, I feel involved in some triangulation operation with the book.
Yeah.
Oh, that's it.
Thank you. Yeah.
No, do what you can with this.
No, but I understand what you mean. You somehow the book doesn't get in the way, no, of somehow you and the model. You feel like, for me, it's surprisingly tactile.
There's a lot of life in it.
Yeah.
Maybe I have a question, because you decide not to put a lot of text, neither essay, I think on purpose, but it can be a little bit disturbing for the reader. So why have you decided to do that? So there is one essay in there, but that's indeed, it's not about the essay. Like 2-3 pages, so it's very like very.
So, I mean, for me, it's always. I'm always, as an architect, I'm always hoping that material can speak for itself, because often you have such complicated ponderings in a sketch or in a model, that to then distill it again to a text feels like it's somehow then dismissing the qualities that are present in the model and the sketch. And when I was studying in architecture, there was this very theoretical architecture where, well, also diagrammatic architecture, no, of course, the Super Dutch MVRDV, where it was more about the concept behind the building than really how the building was built. And you had to tell the story with the building. And I always found that was a pity, because somehow the buildings wouldn't talk to each other anymore in a city without the architects present to explain the story there. So I was always then looking for how much can a building speak by itself, and can we really make this conversation tangible by showing the material. So our previous publication, Building Upon Building, also dealt with that theme very much, purely about the idea of a visual dialogue, and therefore somehow this strand of history, of course, becomes a very important strand, because this dialogue with history often is first made on a visual level and then only later on an intellectual level, because of course the intellectual or the written level sometimes just gets lost in history, no? And the only thing that remains is the visual conversation that can be had within architecture. So I didn't want to be afraid to just show the material. So the exhibition works like that, where it's really just the drawings and the models and the visitor, and somehow by the multitude of material, you should then be able to distill the meaning behind it. And I think also the publication works because of the multitude of its material. There's always a few dissonance, but if you go through it, you do see the patterns and the structures of the general tendencies there.
You want to say something, Frank?
I would say it's a very interesting, unique project with a reflection between drawing and a contemporary proposal. The book is very inspirational, very nice. So we are very happy to have this project, because it's a really good one with the new young and more established architect in Europe. It's a global, sharp and wide-angle project. So thank you to do this very nice work. We appreciate it a lot.
Thank you. I will also give it to my best student, Matthias Cloutou and Sarah Handelman, who were an essential part of creating this.
And just a question,
yes.
Where the exhibition was shown?
In London, it was on Mayfair, just behind the Royal Academy, in a gallery. In Brussels, it was in the SIVA.
Yes.
And now it's in the Irish Architectural Archive on show.
Where?
The Irish Architectural Archive in Dublin.
In Dublin, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Simon, can you tell us why you have selected this book?
Yes. I can, of course, and if you don't mind, Marius, I will speak in French to the jury, because all of us are French. So maybe it will be better, and you know, thing I say. So J'ai choisi ce livre, j'ai voulu qu'il soit présenté à Perpignan à cause de sa forme graphique, à cause de grâce à la graphique de Mathias Clotu. Très bon graphisme qui met beaucoup en avant le travail des maquettes, le choix des matériaux, l'importance des matériaux dans le choix des maquettes, dans la conception d'une maquette. Et j'ai aussi été très intéressé dans ce livre par la question posée par Marius et Jantje, qui est qu'est-ce qu'un architecte contemporain peut faire avec un dessin d'un architecte du passé, fait par un autre architecte plus qu'un architecte du passé. Et j'ai trouvé très intéressante cette question, connaissant la notion d'auteur chez les architectes, l'importance du travail, l'importance de ce qu'ils ont créé. Et j'ai été très intéressé et très touché aussi par ce que les architectes ont fait, ce dialogue entre le passé et le présent, et ce dialogue entre deux conceptions de l'architecture très personnelles à chaque fois. Voilà.
On ne se connaît pas, je vois Samuel. Vous êtes architecte vous-même?
Alors moi, je suis pas architecte, je suis libraire. J'ai la librairie Volume à Paris, une librairie d'architecture, d'urbanisme, de paysage et de photographie. Et je sélectionne les livres d'architecture pour le FILAF depuis 9 ans maintenant, donc j'ai presque 10 ans comme le festival. Malheureusement, ça se passe chacun chez nous cette année.
Bon choix. Merci d'avoir choisi, c'est très original, c'est très beau.
Pardon, j'entends pas bien.
Merci d'avoir fait ce choix. C'est un projet très original, très beau et assez rare et voilà, qui pose plein de questions. C'est un vrai dialogue. C'est super.
Quelle est la réaction du public face à ce livre? Vous l'avez déjà montré dans la librairie?
Alors, le public que moi je vois bien, oui, je l'ai montré dans la librairie. J'étais aussi la première fois que j'ai rencontré le livre, ce que je disais à Marius avant, c'était à l'inauguration de l'exposition à Bruxelles. Le public qui le rencontre est généralement un public il y a deux types de publics en fait. Il y a un public d'architectes spécialistes intéressés par le travail du dessin, l'histoire, le travail que chaque architecte, la façon de représenter en fait des esquisses, souvent la façon de représenter l'espace, le projet, et puis le travail des maquettes aussi. Ce jeu, en fait, ce qui est un grand jeu des architectes, un grand plaisir de représenter l'espace, de le modeler avec les mains. Et l'autre public très intéressé par le livre est un public de graphistes, puisque le travail de Mathias Clotu est très bon. On sent aussi, avec ce choix de reliure en couture singère, ce choix de replier les papiers, on sent beaucoup plus que si ça avait été un coup de massicot pour la reliure, pour le dos, on sent beaucoup plus en fait la matière du papier. Donc il y a à la fois dans l'objet un rapport à la maquette, c'est quelque chose qui est, on sent avec ces feuilles pliées et reliées avec juste un coup de machine à coudre, enfin c'est un coup de machine à coudre plutôt important vu l'épaisseur du livre. On sent aussi le matériau, le rapport au matériau, et aussi avec cette façon de couper ici. Traditionnellement, on met un coup de massicot pour que ce soit tout plat. Là, on sent l'objet, on sent beaucoup plus l'objet que dans un livre que je vais dire plus classique. Et c'est ça qui est intéressant. La rencontre avec le livre, il est à la fois par le contenu et par le contenant. Pour les gens que j'ai vus avec le livre, c'est à la fois waouh, quel objet, et aussi le plaisir du contenu à l'intérieur, et donc de cette rencontre à chaque fois de deux architectes pour produire pour un dessin d'un côté, pour la production d'une maquette. Le tout soit visible avec l'exposition qu'on a pu voir, mais ce n'est pas notre sujet aujourd'hui, enfin la scénographie que propose Marius et Jantje. Mais là, il y a aussi un travail de livre, un travail qui est vraiment singulier du livre. Et la rencontre, elle est positive, elle est un peu comme la vôtre. Je dirais qu'il y a un plaisir à lire et à manipuler le livre.
Ok.
Et l'éditeur de ce livre catalogue objet,
l'éditeur, c'est Drawing Matter, qui est en fait la fondation qui héberge les dessins en Angleterre. Donc, Drawing Matter, c'est une fondation installée dans la campagne anglaise. C'est donc une fondation installée dans la campagne anglaise. Voilà, vous me l'avez expliqué. Voilà.
Super.
Merci. Vous
Merci
n'avez pas
beaucoup.
d'autres questions ou remarques?
Ouais, non.
Non.
C'est transparent, présentation parfaite. Bravo à tous.
So thank you very much.
Merci à vous.
Merci beaucoup.
And,
Good luck. With